Mafia The Old Country was one of my most anticipated games this year. Even though I've never played a Mafia game before, I've always been curious about the series, especially after hearing so many great things about it. Since this game serves as a prequel, I figured it was a perfect entry point even without playing the other titles. Today we're diving deep into Mafia The Old Country to see if it lives up to the hype and if it's a solid starting point for newcomers to the series. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Only Thing Gaming channel. Mafia The Old Country is an action-adventure game developed by Hangar 13 and published by 2K. It's the fourth main entry in the Mafia series, but this one is set decades before the events of the first game. Set in Sicily during the early 1900s, you play as Enzo Favara, a young man who rises through the ranks of the fictional Torrisi crime family. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into the game and see whether it does justice to the franchise or if it falters under its own ambition. Before I start to talk about the story, I wanted to remind you not to worry about spoilers, as I won't spoil anything in this review. Mafia The Old Country offers a compelling narrative that centers around Enzo, a likable protagonist who falls in love with the Don's daughter, Isabella, all while navigating a violent family war between the Torrisi and the Spadaro families. While the story doesn't reinvent the wheel, the characters, voice acting, and writing elevate it to something memorable.
Until the debt is paid, it belongs to us. On my land? You want nothing.
That being said, the story does have its flaws. Some events are predictable and there's a noticeable lull in the action. You spend the first 2 to 3 hours doing chores and learning the ropes, which accounts for about 20 to 30% of your playtime. Personally, I didn't mind this, but it could be a drag for some players. And before we move on with the video, don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button. While the story is clearly the star here, it's hard to ignore that the gameplay is limited. It's not necessarily bad, but it's definitely not groundbreaking. Let's break it down. The stealth mechanics are laughably easy. I don't think I ever got detected unless I wanted to. The AI doesn't exactly put up much of a challenge either. They seem to have a habit of forgetting to look behind them. Driving and horse riding are functional but basic. You can even skip these segments if you prefer to avoid them, which is a nice touch. As for combat, the shooting mechanics feel a bit rough around the edges. The variety of weapons is decent, pistols, rifles, shotguns, but the shooting itself isn't perfect. The sounds though,
Get back here!
spot on. The reloads, gunfire, and bullet impacts are satisfying if nothing else. Knife fights are a unique mechanic, but they are limited in scope. While fun the first few times, they quickly get repetitive as each encounter feels the same, with no real differentiation in weapons or moves. In a way, the game's structure and combat reminds me of two classics. The shooting, weapons, and setting reminds me of Red Dead Redemption 1, while the level design that displays the story through chapters in a world that's explorable but not completely open reminds me of the Uncharted series. Now let's talk sound and voice acting. With the exception of the main theme of the game, the soundtrack doesn't really stand out, but it does a decent job of setting the atmosphere even if the music isn't something you'll remember after finishing the game. What does stand out, however, is the voice acting. The performances here are top-notch and really breathe life into the characters. Tino and Don Torrisi in particular are absolute highlights. The depth they bring to their roles is impressive, and they really carry some of the more intense moments.
This life is one of secrecy. If you make a friend, meet a woman, they must not know about our thing.
It is binding. It is not forgiving.
The rest of the cast is solid, but these two characters are in a league of their own. Visually, Mafia The Old Country can be breathtaking at times, but there are some noticeable glitches and bugs that can pull you out of the experience. I used native 1080p with medium settings and low textures because I have an 8GB GPU in my PC, and I alternated between turning FSR frame generation on and off depending on the case. For my PC build, which I'll put on the screen if you're curious, the game's performance wasn't acceptable. The FPS can drop to even below 20 FPS in some cases. Once the VRAM usage passes the 8GB threshold, the FPS breaks regardless of the settings. The only solution is to restart the game. FSR is becoming more mandatory to play at decent FPS, and turning frame generation on can cause problems like flickering shadows or input delay. It's clear that modern games are pushing the limits of 8GB GPUs, and I'm seriously considering upgrading to something with at least 12GB of VRAM from Nvidia. As for consoles, I haven't tested, but I haven't heard any complaints regarding performance, so I'm assuming it runs well across the board. After everything we've discussed, it's tough to give this game a definitive score, but breaking it down into the main categories, story, gameplay, voice acting, and performance, I'd say Mafia The Old Country has a lot going for it, especially if you're a fan of story-driven experiences. For me, it was a perfect introduction to the Mafia series, and I'm definitely going to dive into the trilogy as soon as I could. So, with all that in mind, I'm giving Mafia The Old Country a solid 8 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it's a great game that's definitely worth your time. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. How much out of 10 would you rate the game and why? Let me know your thoughts on the game. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out one of the two videos you see on your screen right now.